we need to critique Russia right now, but you can't really critique Russia if we don't understand why Russia is doing what Russia is doing. And the best way to understand why Russia is doing what Russia is doing is to see where we did the same thing. Are you familiar with what's going on in Ukraine? And do you have any idea? Could you sum it up in a couple statements?
I know that Russia is essentially trying to take over Ukraine. Russia's trying to establish Ukraine as, I assume, its territory and just expand the Russian empire, or I guess not an empire.
When you think about Russia doing that, what's your natural feeling toward Russia?
Well, I mean, you have to bring up the history with the USSR.
No, yeah, but
and NATO and all that.
Well, what's your feeling about Russia doing that?
It's pretty negative. I mean, Ukraine's its own nation. And it has the right to be its own nation. I don't think it's right that Russia's just coming in there trying to take over.
Mm-hmm. And when you think about Russia doing that, and you think about the United States, do you have any examples that come to mind of when the United States has done that? Or when we're doing it, even like right now, where in the world we're doing that?
I mean, I'm aware that the United States has a lot of troops located around the world, and they're trying to establish U.S. diplomacy in other countries. I guess you could use that as a comparison, and obviously, the U.S. has fought in, the Korean War and the Vietnam War, so they're trying to establish themselves there. But weren't they, in those situations, fighting on behalf of those independent nations? Isn't it a little bit different? Because they're not essentially trying to take over and make it the United States?
Well, Russia's not trying to make the Ukraine Russia. They're really trying to establish their Ukraine as part of the Russian Federation. So they don't want it to be
I didn't
Russian.
know. I thought they were actually trying.
No, that's okay. That's okay, dude. So they're not trying to do that. So I asked you, what do you know about cases either today or through U.S. history when we do a similar thing? And why do you think I asked you that?
Because it sort of goes back to the idea of nationalism and sort of, establishing the ideals of America in other countries and stuff like that.
Okay. So what do you think about me doing that? Like if I talk about Russia, but I'm like, hang on, we're going to talk about Russia, but before we do that, we also got to talk about the United States here. How do you feel about that? Or should I just talk about Russia and not talk about the United States?
Personally, I prefer the ideals of the United States, and I believe that those free values would be better for the world if more countries embraced them.
Yeah.
Am I super in favor of the United States going into these territories and fighting on behalf of certain regimes? I'm not really sure. Obviously, Vietnam didn't turn out very well, nor did Korea.
Do you know how many civilians were killed in Vietnam and Cambodia?
I don't know the exact number, but it was a lot.
Like what's your guess?
Couple million.
Okay. Well, it's more than that, but that's okay. You got a couple million here. What you need to know is, I'm not equalizing the United States or Russia. They're two very different societies, okay? Very different political systems. Sometimes when I talk about stuff like this, people think, oh, you're just comparing us to you're just making it seem like it's the same. I'm not making it seem like it's the same. I think we need to critique Russia right now, but you can't really critique Russia if we don't understand why Russia is doing what Russia is doing. And the best way to understand why Russia is doing what Russia is doing is to see where we did the same thing. So I sometimes get critiqued because people think I should only talk about the good things or the positive things in the U.S. or whatever the case is. This is the U.S. and the USSR, right? After World War II, the world essentially got divided into two camps. The eagle, that's the U.S. and NATO, the blue, and then the bear, we call it, and that would be the Soviet Union, the communists, right? Communist countries. So we have China here, we have everything in red, including Cuba down here. We could put Nicaragua here, partly red. So this is all aligned with the Soviet Union. The Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic is what USSR stands for. And Russia was the main country. This is Russia. And then, we're associated with NATO and the U.S. and so on, right? And so we divided the world up. We fought the Cold War. You know something about this, right?
Yes.
Why did we fight the Cold War?
Well, Russia was expanding, or the USSR, they were expanding communism, throughout Eastern Europe and different places there, Vietnam and Korea, obviously. United States and other free nations took that as a threat.
Yeah.
And we didn't necessarily go to war. We just had, there were wars that resulted in it, the Korean and Vietnam, but it was more of like different competing. It was kind of competing.
So when we expanded capitalism into Latin America, how would you describe that?
I'm not too aware of that part of history.
Okay.
I don't remember. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We talk about the U.S. and democracy and so on. Every country, we see ourselves more positively. We see ourselves positively. Everything we would say about the Soviet Union expanding, the U.S. was expanding. We were expanding our markets. We were expanding, we called it freedom, but they called it freedom. It's the same thing. We did not want any of this to turn red. These people were talking about things like freedom and democracy and safety and security, and they were critiquing their governments who were taking their land and stealing their resources, and we called them communists, and then, we sent the resources down that their countries could destroy them. The people I met who have been tortured by the United States, by innocent people, right? It's just like the stories that I could tell you are just absolutely horrific. And it's the same thing, we were imposing our ideas on it, right? So we don't even have to go to Vietnam. We can just go here to Latin America. But we did it for good reason, right? But I want to give you the Russian side of the story, okay? So here's 1949 to 1980. You can see this, right? So this is what was the Soviet Union. And they just took over these countries after World War II. And I don't think that's a good thing. I wish we hadn't. We hadn't just sort of given up to the Soviet Union, but we did, and NATO did, and Western Europe did. And so this is Crimea right here. In Crimea, the Russians put their largest naval base that they had. The Soviet Union did, the Soviets did, right here in the tip of Crimea. And this is the key to everything. Because you want to be able to come through Turkey, like the Bosphorus and so on, like right through here, and come out into the Atlantic. This is everything for the Russians. This is like the key. People say that Crimea is the key to controlling that whole region of the world. And the Russians had that. And the Russians are saying, listen, y'all, you keep pulling these countries over here to the NATO side, and we're looking out for our geopolitical interests. Like, you take them, so I'm going to be the Russians for a second, right? These were part of the Soviet Empire. Then the Soviet Empire breaks down in 1989, and one by one, you keep pulling them over into NATO. And that's very destabilizing for us. You can't do that. And especially Crimea. And Crimea is what we're fighting over right now. So Crimea is part of the Ukraine, and it's separate, but it's part. And all these people around here, they speak Russian, and lots of people in Crimea speak Russian. And the Russians are saying, you can't, Ukraine, we are not letting Ukraine go toward NATO. We are not letting Ukraine go to the United States. It's too unsettling. It's too dangerous for us. We don't want to do that. We need the Ukraine as part of our orbit because we're looking out for ourselves. And I thought, well, my God, that's what the United States has done. That's what we did all through Latin America. All that happened to them because we didn't want to allow these countries to go toward a different orbit. We said, we're not going to let that happen. And so what we're going to do is we're going to allow the slaughter of millions and millions and millions of innocent people because we, the United States, don't want to allow these countries to go toward a different geopolitical orbit. And that's exactly what Putin and the Russians are saying about Crimea. You're not coming in here and you're not taking this. This is us. They need to be aligned with us.
I have a few questions. First, Russia today, it's not the USSR. They don't have communism.
It's the Russian Federation.
They are trading with countries like Germany and a few others.
And us.
So why is it so necessary that they establish themselves in Ukraine and Crimea if they're not trying to uphold communism versus capitalism, essentially?
Because we all have these nuclear missiles pointed at one another. They're still our stated enemy, right? And we're still their enemy, and they're still our enemy, and we are still fighting the Cold War, even though it's not cold, it's actually warm now. So we're still fighting it out. And the reason we're fighting it out is because everybody's battling for resources in the world. You want to have more resources for your people than somebody else has for their people. So they're battling us for resource control. This is what's happening with China, right? So everyone's fighting for the precious resources of the world. So that's what they're doing. Anyway, listen, dude. Yo, Stephen, give him...